Let's switch to the Fed because we've had a lot of comments recently. You don't know when the announcement's going to be made, or what's there's things happening today, I guess, at the Supreme Court regarding the Fed. Jay Powell's planning to visit to watch the proceedings with Lisa Cook.
Well, couple of things, Joe. My guess is the president will reach a decision maybe as soon as next week. We've had substantial conversations about this. We've run a process that started in September. 11 very strong candidates. We're now down to 4 candidates. The president has personally met with all of them, and it's going to be his decision. In terms of the Supreme Court hearing, I believe, I'm not sure whether it's today or tomorrow, Jay Powell has announced he's going to attend, and Joe, I got to tell you, I actually think that's a mistake, because if you're trying not to politicize the Fed, for the Fed chair to be sitting there trying to put his thumb on the scale is a real mistake.
And there's a lot to talk about, obviously, with Jay Powell. There's this great economy that you were just talking about. So obviously the Fed has managed rates to the extent that it allowed us to get to where we are right now, notwithstanding what we saw a couple of years ago when maybe the Fed was too slow in the face of that inflation, the post-pandemic inflation. But there are other things that you've pointed to. Jay Powell is not just the chairman that sets interest rates. He runs this huge behemoth of an organization, unelected, that is a huge part of Americans, of their lives in this country. And you're CEO and COO of that organization, and that's where you have some issues.
Look, I think that the Fed's monetary policy independence is very important. I think that a lot of the issues around the independence are being created by the other things that are happening. So, let's look. Under Chair Powell's watch, we will have seen between 4 to 6 governors and presidents have to resign for ethical issues. That's out of 19, Joe. If that happened at a Wall Street firm, CEO would be out.
And we found out in hindsight most of the time. We're not sure why. It's not transparent.
And it's not transparent. And again, the independence does not mean lack of accountability. The Fed has a special obligation to the American people because it influences their lives, but they are unelected. They are not subject to appropriations. They have magic money. They print their own money. This big cost overrun for the Fed building, they'll just print more. They'll just print more money. So I don't think there's anything wrong with some accountability. And look, just to be clear, the Federal Reserve is now losing $100 billion a year. $100 billion a year because of mistimed asset purchases. I think that was a big mistake.
How does this resolve itself? I know that this isn't your purview necessarily, but do you see perhaps there are a couple of things that we wanted Chair Powell to make clear? If that were done, would the subpoena go away at that point? There's a delegation of senators coming. They're not going to, Senator Tillis, I don't think he's going to be not running for re-election, obviously, but he's saying they won't even bring up a nominee until this is settled.
Well, a couple of things, Joe. I think that any of the 4 nominees are very, very strong candidates. 2, I don't know about you, if I got a subpoena, or it wasn't initially a subpoena, it was questions from U.S. Attorney's Office, I would answer it. So perhaps these questions could be answered and we can move along. I'm not going to comment on an ongoing investigation.
I think I saw another interview you did that we need, in your view, a Fed chairman similar to Greenspan that cannot get too agitated about a hot GDP number and think it immediately translates to resurgent inflation because of productivity.
Well, it's clear that we are at the nascent stages of a productivity boom, not unlike the 1990s. I tell all your viewers, go back and read Bob Woodward's book, Maestro, about Alan Greenspan and how he correctly let the economy run hot, that we had very substantial GDP growth. We were able to pay down a lot of debt. I don't know if you remember, Joe, but in the end of the 90s, there was talk, well, what are we going to do if there's no government debt? Or what if we're going to do if there's not a deficit? And that would be a nice position to be in. But I do think it's important to have an open mind, let the economy do what it's going to do, understand that we are in a productivity boom, and let's see what happens, because my prediction is that inflation is going to drop substantially this year. Observable inflation is very different than reported inflation. We're seeing rents drop. We're going to see health care drop. So I think a very good chance the Fed's going to be back on target.